everybody, and welcome to GenFriends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And as usual, I have a fabulous panel joining me tonight. I've got Bernice Bennett, and y'all know Bernice. She speaks, she writes, and she's got a website. It's genearoots.com. So remember that all of our panelists, I always put on the blog post, I always put how to get in touch with them. So make sure you watch the video and then go to the blog post to get any links or whatever we may talk about, especially the links to the panelists, so you can maybe ask them any further questions that you may want to. We have Melissa Barker, the archive lady, here with us. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. Cool. So glad to be here tonight.
And she's always got her really cool real photo of the archives behind her, because that's where she works every day. She just doesn't call herself the archive lady. She works in an archives. I'm jealous of that.
I'm jealous that she hasn't told me how to put that kind of picture behind.
Well, we'll have to. Yeah, we'll that'll be on a after the show or something like that. Okay, we'll do that. All right, and we have Shelley Murphey, the family tree girl, with us.
Hello.
Today. How are you? You guys all doing good tonight?
Yes.
Great.
Doing good.
We thought it would be great to talk about beginners, genealogy beginners, and talk to you about tips we wish we'd had when we were starting our genealogy journey, mistakes that we made and brick walls that we created of our own doing. We thought that we would maybe share some tips and tricks for those of you that are just beginning. But you know what, even if you've been doing it for a while, sometimes it's good to remind yourselves to go back and think, am I doing this? Am I doing that? As Shelley mentioned right before we came on the show, that we create our own brick walls because maybe we're just doing that quick click, genealogy with those family trees, or, we need a second set of eyes to look at what we're doing, or maybe we just need some tips about doing some things, because a lot of times those brick walls can be solved by the records that we already have. We've looked at them 100 times. So anyway, I think it'd be kind of fun if you could tell us real quick, real shortly, how you even got started in genealogy, and then share a few tricks. So Melissa, would you like to start tonight?
Sure. I actually got started doing genealogy in a funeral home. A great place to get the bug, get the addiction. About 30 years ago, my husband had a family member that was in the funeral home. So, in the South, we have visitation nights, and then we have the funeral. So we were at visitation, and I was sitting there, and I was watching this lady go to each and every person, sit down with them with this notebook and write and talk and write and talk. And I thought, what is she doing? So I already knew I had a curious mind. So I just went up to her and I asked her, what are you doing? And she says, well, I'm doing genealogy. And it was part of my husband's family. And she showed me her notebook. And I asked her, I said, and I didn't even, because see, I had never done genealogy. So why I even thought to do this, I said, can I take that home and copy it and bring it back to you tomorrow at the funeral? So she said, sure. So I took it home and I copied it, and it just took off from there.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Bernice, how about you? How'd you get started on this journey?
Well, I was teaching at Johns Hopkins University in back in 1976, and I was invited to speak at the anthropology class. And they wanted me to come into the class and talk about my family history. And so I called my mother, and my mother just sent me pictures, lots of pictures, and she would say who these people were in the pictures. So that's how I started. But I'm not going to say it was continuous.
Yeah.
I did stop. But then started again when it was a conversation I had with a girlfriend. She said, you know so much because your grandmother lived to be over 100 years old. You know a lot. And I got to thinking, I really do know something. And I just started writing down the stuff that my grandmother told me. And my mother was still alive, so I could ask her some questions about my father because he was deceased. And that's kind of how I got started.
That's wonderful. At 100 years old, I'm so jealous because you did get a good start. Shelley, what about you?
Mama. It was Mama as well. My mother started writing letters requesting death certificates and birth certificates, and she didn't know about carbon copy paper. So, and right now in the garage in a box and her filing cabinet in her room, she has copies of every letter where she requested something from a county courthouse, because back then there was no internet. This is about 70, maybe 74, 75. So I started helping her. Really wasn't dealing with the internet or anything like that at that time, but it was asking questions. And so as she started talking, then that made, telling, that's when the story started telling. And so that's what got me started, was helping her.
Wow,
Because she made copies. She wrote 2 letters of everything that she requested, and she kept all her copies.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
I think for a lot of us, it's the stories. We hear a story. That's what happened for
Right.
me. And I mean, I've told y'all this before and told other people this, but my mom's father died in World War II. And I can remember I probably was just maybe preteen. And I said to her one day, Mom, why do we call, and it was my grandmother's husband, why do we call Frank Frank instead of Grandpa? Because all my friends have, it's Grandpa. Why do we just call him by his first name? So that's when she sat me down. She said, well, he's not my dad. Frank is my stepfather. My father died in World War II. And I can just remember just being like, what? I mean, where have I been all these years? You just don't click as a kid. You just don't, think about it. And so I got to see a picture of him, and we talked about him. And that, I can't say that I jumped into genealogy, but that's the first time I can remember being really interested in a story and realizing things happened that my family, my grandparents, their parents were real people that had, things happen to them. They just weren't, grandma and grandpa or whatever. And so that's when I really started asking questions and wanting to know what was going on. And then as I got a little bit older, I started actually wanting to get the records. And I was one of those that at that time I was writing, to people, do you have any information? And I'd get the letters with the photos and the, pictures of great-great-grandparents, because I've got it. I'm not in their line, but I loved them, and now you should have it, kind of thing, And so I started being, like, my mom calls me the keeper of all things. So I started being sent things as I contacted people and started filling out those pedigree charts and things like that. So then, you start that, and then what happens? I mean, that's one thing we need to warn people about. It is an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Right. And the other warning is, whether you're doing paper genealogy or DNA, you just don't know what you're going to find. And you need to be prepared, because you may find things that you were not expecting to find.
Yeah.
Our ancestors were human beings, and they made the same mistakes that people make today.
Definitely. I just spoke at a family reunion.
Mm-hmm.
And after I talked about all this wonderful stuff, here came that DNA question.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, I'm going to give it to y'all straight. Y'all need to decide right now if you want to go that route or not. But the warning was that if something came back that you didn't know about as a family, you decide how y'all going to deal with it.
Exactly.
And that was critical. I said, because they had so much oral history. And I was thinking to myself in the back of my mind, I got all this oral history, and I'm thinking, something that's not going to come back right.
Something's going to be different from that oral history.
Pa or sister ate the sister, something.
Exactly. I mean, the oral history may, be the names of the people that raised us and were the parents, but the DNA may show that they may not have been biological.
Correct.
So that could be the problem. So Bernice, what would you tell somebody who's just starting? What kind of tips would you give them? What do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
You still have to start with yourself. You have to at least write down mom and dad's name, grandparents' names, And even that first cousin that walks in the house, figure out how that person is your first cousin and talk to the aunts. I think that sometimes we don't go far enough, wide enough. We need to go wide and deep, as Nika Smith would say, with DNA. Well, we need to do the same thing just with our family members, and reach out, ask the questions, be non-threatening, and also non-dictatorial, but in some kind of way have that conversation over some lemon cake and a cup of coffee, and see if you can get some information about the family. I know I went to my father's aunt, and I just knew she was going to be able to tell me everything I needed to know about my family in South Carolina. And she would tell me about her father and what have you. And then she said, we don't have anybody in South Carolina. And she ended it with getting in all my business. And with that, I knew I had family in South Carolina, still alive, that I could reach out to.
Exactly. Sometimes it's what they don't say that tells you.
So you need to follow up on the hints, because sometimes you won't get all the details, but you have to listen for little hints, like Bernice, it happened a long time ago. Leave it alone, baby. Hey, what happened a long time ago?
Exactly. That's when your ears pick up and you're going, okay. Yep. I like how you go ahead.
Listen with a third ear. Okay.
Yes. And I do like what you said about talking to all the family members, because I think sometimes as beginners, we are one track. We want to go up that tree, just our direct ancestors, and we forget that they had siblings, and then there were cousins, because they're the ones that may have the information that you need. That brother, his death certificate may name the parents, where your ancestors' birth certificate, if you can or cannot find it, may name the parents. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we all made at the beginning, is we just, I want to find the grandparent, then the great-grandparent, then the great-grandparent, and we kind of get just tunnel vision. So reach out to the whole family. Shelley, what about you?
You know what? I really think it's knowing what you have. So if I get a document, even a birth certificate, back then, I was so excited that I had it, but I never knew really what I had and how to extract information out of it. So I think that is one thing, I would have learned how to analyze in those early years versus what I've been doing, say, in the last 10, 12 years. I made it harder for myself. And that's why I teach so much about analyzing and the so what, because there's so many clues in documents, and it could be what's not there that is the clue. So one of the drills we do at Maggie in track 1 is when I give them a death certificate that's filled out wonderfully, and then they take the hints and they have to draft up what things they go to leading towards their research plan. Then the next death certificate has missing information. So they're having to go through the drill again to come up, well, who would have that? Or what would have that type of information? And if I would have had that 20 years ago, oh my God, I'd probably be a lot further along than what I am.
Well, that's a great point. Education is so, so important. And, back in the day, we would have to travel, right, for education.
Or AOL,
or
the little Prodigy and AOL or whatever it was,
There was some kind of society around you or something like that. So, but today there's so many free things. Of course, there's, things that cost money, webinars and things like that cost money, but there's a lot of free things as well. So educate yourself. See what the processes are that will help you with your, like you were talking about analyzing. Understand what the GPS is. I know a lot of people say, well, what is that? And isn't that just for professionals and people doing client work? No, the genealogical proof standard is for everybody. That reasonably exhaustive research, meaning find everything that you can, because any document can be wrong.
That's my so what right there.
I don't care if it's got an official stamp on it. I don't care if it's carved in stone.
Right.
Anything can be wrong. My big one is citing your sources. And one of the things that I talk about in I was telling you guys, I've got this presentation called Confessions of a Repentant Genealogist.
I love
Mistakes
that.
I've made. Grandma said is not a source citation, people. So it's just not a source citation. You have to know where you found your information so that you can get back to it again, or you can share it with other people. You know you're going to have to get back to it again sometime, so please write down. That was one of my big mistakes, is not writing things down. So also, to resolve any conflicts, I'm just running through this GPS really quick. If you've got things that aren't making sense or telling different things, you can't just say, well, I'm just going to go with this one. The family said it was this one. No, you've got to figure out why. You've got documents that are giving different information. Figure it out. You can't just do that, because then you could be off. Just because the family said this is what happened doesn't make it so. You've got to figure out why. You've got information that's telling you different things, and then you've got to write it up. You have to write up everything that you found. When you write things up, you see the holes. You're like,
Definitely.
oh dear, I see now why this is missing. So make sure you write things up. How about you, Melissa?
Before I say what I'm going to say, write things up. Dr. Shelley, timelines. I'm a timeline girl. I'm a timeline girl. If you'd asked me this question probably 10, 11 years ago, I'd have given you a different answer, but I became an archivist in that time. I was a genealogist from 1990 up until today, but I became an archivist in 2010. And so my answer is going to change, and because of what I have seen in the archives world. And Bernice is at the National Archives, so she can probably relate. I would tell new genealogists, when you go to any repository, ask them for a tour of the facility. And the reason I tell people to do that is because you're going to see things behind closed doors that you don't see in the research area that you'll know is available. Talking to the archivist is great, and they can help you and tell you, but seeing sometimes, I can tell you there are things in my archives that I never dreamed that I could do research in. I mean, and my ancestors aren't even from here. My husband's are, but mine are not. And so what I have seen as being an archivist that I've thought, wow, I need to check, because mine are in Ohio and West Virginia, and I think I need to check with the archives there. Do they have these kinds of records like I have? And so if you're going to a facility, an archives, a library, a museum, wherever you're going, call ahead, email ahead, and say, hey, when I get there, could you take me on a tour of the facility? I would love to see the back rooms, the records. And, I just think if I had done that early on as a genealogist, I think I would have known about different records and more records faster.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I like that. And you talked about, you've got things in your archives and you don't have any family there, and you like to see what people will say to me, well, I don't live where genealogy societies are for my ancestors. It doesn't matter. Join them, because you're going to have classes. You're going to have people in there that you can talk to that can help you be a better researcher. You can help if they've got projects where they're indexing, or where they're, whatever they might be doing a cemetery. Go help, because you are helping that community. Meanwhile, somebody else is helping you and your ancestors' community. You can give back that way, and you're learning processes as you're doing it. So don't sit back and think, oh, I don't live where my ancestors live. I wish when I first was getting into this, and I didn't live near South Carolina, I didn't think along those lines. And I know where I was living at the time in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, they have a really good genealogy society. Why wasn't I going? I should have. They would have helped me, and I would have been farther along, and they would have given me some ideas when I got stumped, and helped me maybe avoid some of those dumb mistakes that I made. Another thing that I like to tell people is spelling doesn't count in genealogy.
Yeah.
I can remember when I was trying to show my grandmother some records, and she, her maiden name was Doherty, and it was spelled in her family, Daugrity. Well, farther back in the generations, it was Dor or even Rrity. And she would say to me, that's not my family. That's not my family. That's not how we spelled our names. And I have to say, yes, this is your family. And have to remind people that people just wrote their names just the way they wanted to write their names. And even in that family, so her father did the Daugrity. His brother spells it completely different. So that line of the family spells it differently. So spelling doesn't count. And I know a lot of people create their own brick walls by just saying, this is the way my family spelled the name. And so I can't find any records of my family in this county. Well, you have to, Doherty can be spelled like 100 different ways. So Smith can be spelled 100 different ways. It can have a Y. It could have an E at the end. It can, you know. So don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself. What else, you guys? Go ahead, Bernice.
I mean, you're saying don't limit yourself in that vein, but think about all of the nicknames. I mean, I have a great-grandmother named Lutetia, but some places she's Letty. Some places she's Tish. So you just need to think of all the variations of the name that your ancestor might use or they may call her, in addition to birth year. You know,
yes.
So true.
A 5-year difference in birth year, but it is the correct person.
The same person.
Same person, same location, same family grouping. It's just that you can't say, oh, no, that's not the person because that's the wrong year. No, they don't know.
They didn't know how old they were. Most people really didn't know how old
they were. Yeah, but y'all think about it. We did that too when we got started.
I know. I know.
We did it.
Yeah.
That's why we're trying to tell it. Yeah.
That's right.
There's a lot of, look how many people we missed and how many lines we missed information. And again, I know now, say in the last 12 years, those 10 years maybe, research the whole family. Yes. Not just a direct line. Everybody in the family, all of the kids, everybody, and the whole community.
And the whole community.
Never done that.
Yes.
Never done. No. And I only went to historical societies. I never went to the local library. That's another thing. Those are your friends.
Yeah.
those are your buddies.
Exactly.
That little local librarian, they know the families around the libraries because they've been in those positions for 40, 50 years, you know, in a community. And that was another thing for me to open up and say, just do everything. But there's also things that told me not to do everything because of time. And so there is no limit, you know, and like the project I'm working on, they should have started this project 2 years ago. No, seriously, instead of hiring someone for 6 months, which is okay. So some of what I'm doing, in case they don't renew it, it'll be in place that people can just pick up.
Right.
Going. You know, finding descendants, it's just as hard as finding your ancestors.
That's true. Very true. That's very true. You know, another thing that I wish I'd realized, and if I'd have listened to people and taken classes, I would have known this, is that research plan. Figure out what you're looking for instead of just this trying to get it all at once. Try to get it all at once, you know, and that's what I was doing. I was afraid all these older people were going to die. You know? So I was writing to everybody, what do you have? Do you have photos? And I made it very clear, you know, I'm not asking you for if you can make copies, that's great. I'll pay for the copies. That was before, you know, scanners and all that kind of stuff.
The phones. There was no phones.
There was no, exactly. I had to write to people and so I was trying to get everything from everybody. And so I ended up with piles of stuff, you know, so I had to figure out how to organize it, but I had to learn how to figure out where I was going next instead of the shotgun approach and really not getting much done, a little bit here and a little bit there, is to come up with a research plan. It really does work. What's my research question?
Yeah.
You know, what am I looking for specifically? What am I looking for? Where could I look for it? then, you know, go look for it and then write down what I found and what that told me. Did it answer my question? If not, now can I reform my question? But where does that lead me? And I also didn't realize that almost every record that you find, like Shelley was saying earlier, has a clue to another record. I was so busy getting that, you know, death certificate and going, okay, I know when he died, put the death certificate away and go on to something else, you know, instead of, and I think we've all done that, instead of taking that record, pulling all the information out and seeing where, like Shelley says, so what? So what? What does that record say? Where is it leading you? So make sure you do that. And so I would tell anybody that was just starting, whatever you have right now, stop researching. Completely just stop for a few minutes, a few days, even if it takes a month, whatever it takes. Go back over everything you have. Look at it, pull out the information, and see if you don't already have some of those answers. Take a couple of courses. That doesn't mean you can't be researching along the way, but take some classes. Try to build some of those skills. And if you do that, your frustration level is going to be a little bit less. We're still going to have some of those ancestors that we want to just say, oh, what was wrong with you that you couldn't leave records? What do you mean he just left and nobody knows where he went? That's not good. So why did he do that? But
Selma Stewart gave me a tip. This is back 2006, and Selma Stewart is down in Hampton.
Okay.
She's a member of an OGS chapter. Actually, she was the president down there in Hampton, Newport News area. And she said, and I incorporate this when I'm presenting, and I'm following on the track of what you just said, but she said James Dent Walker told the group, because he was speaking, and he was at the National Archives back in the 70s. He's what started OGS.
Okay.
And so
tell everybody real quick what OGS is in case they don't know.
Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, AAHGS. And it's a national organization with 34 chapters throughout the U.S. And to have a, annual conference, and you got the local chapters and things.
Okay.
And he spoke down at their meeting that they had, and they were at a library. And now I call it the rule of three. And then I always explain to make sure people know who James Dent Walker is. And what he had told them in a presentation, and Selma shared with me, not only does every record create a record, but what he said, don't just tell me that so-and-so is so-and-so's relative. Give me three things, three pieces of evidence to back up. So whatever you're trying to claim, a father-son relationship, maybe these are the parents, give me three pieces to come up, which makes you do more research a little deeper. And so you're exhausting a search. So if I say
reasonably exhaustive.
If I say this is the father and son, give me three documentation or something that connects that father and son.
Right.
And this is how I got through DAR. That's how I got through my application, because I had to think, because I was going into another area, a records era span in the 1700s. And it was like, this is not normal. No, wait a minute. They don't have what we have now as much. And so I kept having to keep digging until I could document that lineage. And I had backup of three things. If not, I had to write a good summary.
You had to write a good, figure out why. Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes the records just don't exist, and you can't find three. But that's what reasonably exhaustive research is. And that's part of your research plan.
Yeah.
Which records could possibly, if they were created, answer my question? What could I look for? And you need to do a little bit of research in the area that you're searching, so that you're not beating your head against the wall trying to get a birth certificate when birth certificates were never created at that time period.
And then where else would you find a birthday, somebody's birthday written down?
Yeah,
so exactly. It takes you to an exhaustive search.
Exactly.
Bible. You know.
Right. And a lot of people get caught up in that terminology. Oh my gosh. So especially new people, they get caught up. So take some time, get a little education, and ask questions. You could email any of us on this panel. Our information's on the blog post. You've got people in your community that will help you. You've got free, webinars. The legacy webinars are free every Wednesday afternoon. They're free for a week. I mean, there are a lot of free things out there that can get you going. And then if you want to pay and get more education, then you certainly can. But don't let that get you, oh, I can't afford any kind of education. You can. There's a lot of free stuff out there. So,
and I would say that, and I beat this dead horse every time, but it's not all online. And that's probably going to be on my tombstone.
It's not.
But, it's not.
You, Melissa. It's not all.
I know. It's not all online. And I've actually really started that mantra when I became an archivist, because then I saw if my little archives has as much that's not online, just think about all the other archives out there. And I had a gentleman today. That I was at a different meeting. It wasn't in an archives. It was another preservation meeting somewhere. And he was not in, the genealogy archives world. He was a consultant. But he came up to me and was talking about, I've always wanted to do my genealogy. He said, well, now that it's so easy to do, I should do it. And I'm like, what do you mean easy? He said, it's all online. And I was like, I don't have time to give you my spiel.
You said that to the wrong person.
But it's so true. And I hear more and more new genealogists say, oh, well, I'll just get online. Or I've seen questions say, well, I've been to Ancestry, I've been to Family Search, I've been to those places, I just can't find anything. I'm not going to be able to.
Exactly.
And I just want to tell them the treasures and the thrills that can be found in all of our repositories.
And I think part of that too is, they get this perception that everything is online. They can just go build that family tree and they'll be able to find everything. And then if they can't, that means they have a brick wall.
Right.
But I think for a lot of people, especially starting out, it's a little intimidating. You say archives and they're like, oh, because I know my first time was, oh, you must have to be this real professional genealogist to know how to go into an archives. Oh my goodness, just go.
Well, that's why I started the archive lady.
Because
I could see people when they walked in archives, they were just so overwhelmed. They didn't know what to do.
Right.
They didn't come with a plan.
Right.
And I thought, not that I know it all, because I do not. I learn every single day.
We all do.
That's what I started the archive lady for, was to educate people, that pull back that curtain from the archives and say, we are people just like anybody else. We have the records and we want to share them with you.
Well, just when I was in DC for the FGS conference, I had never been to the National Archives, and I was a little intimidated to go. I've been to lots of different archives all over the place, and I walked in and I went, this is just, it's an archives. I know how to fill out the paperwork.
No,
it's really okay. And there were people that just walked me through the whole thing, and I thought, why did I even feel the slightest bit intimidated? Don't feel intimidated. Just go. They'll be so grateful that you're there. That you will find people to help you.
First of all, yes, everything is definitely not online, and I love going to the local source, but I also want to know about the story.
Yes.
Sometimes it's the story that's going to guide your research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that you've heard. Yes. And then you can formulate that question. And from that question, it really directs you to find the answer. So you're not running all over the place. I think right now, I'm finding that even some of my DNA matches, they don't know enough to know where they want to go with being a DNA cousin. And so I think that we need to talk about what's the story.
Yes.
How do you verify? You're going to get something, or you've heard something from somebody. And so, think that that's a way to kind of maybe wrap people into genealogy also. Because they're trying to verify, how do I go about doing that? And I do believe that there's a great deal of value in studying the community.
Yes.
Because the community is where your ancestors lived, they thrived in that community and they gave something in that community. And so what did they give to the church? What did they give to the school? What did they give to the healthcare system? I mean, there's something there to help draw everyone in to formulate that research plan. So keep that in mind.
Exactly. I love that. You guys, these are great tips. Does anybody have anything that I don't want somebody, to go off and say, oh my goodness, I had this great tip, but I didn't think about sharing it. So can anybody think of anything else? Shelley, you got something? Shelley's got something.
Money. This is for the beginners.
Okay.
This is another one of these mantra type things. Follow the money. Follow the land. Follow the community. Follow the water. And follow the faith of the people.
Exactly.
That will help you through all your research. Right.
Absolutely. We should come up with an acronym for that. We've got
I know.
club.
I haven't. I need to. I'm going to work on that. Money, land, water.
Come up with your own acronym.
I'll come up with it.
Okay. And for those of you that are starting, I said fan club. That's the friends, associates, and neighbors. So those, once you've exhausted everything you can find about the family, everybody associated with the family, don't forget to research the in-laws. Don't forget them, because they associated with that family. Once you've gone through that and you're I still can't find anything, who did they associate
the
with?
exes.
Who were the exes? Absolutely. The first and second wife. Just because your ancestor came through the first wife or the second wife or the third or whatever it might be, you should also research the other wives, because they're going to have records. So friends, associates, and neighbors, just keep going out and out and out, and you'd be surprised how many records will mention your person. So I like that, Shelley. That was really good. Come up with that.
There's no vowel in there, so I can't come up with anything.
We can figure out something. Anybody else? Anybody else want to?
Don't forget the newspaper.
Don't ever forget newspapers. No. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Bernice. The things you can find in newspapers, because people say that we don't have any privacy today. You should have lived. You went to court. Every word in the transcript of that court was printed in the newspaper. You went to visit somebody.
It's in the newspaper.
It's in the newspaper. You want to divorce your wife? You're going to put the letter in the newspaper.
That's right.
You run away from your husband, you're going to say he was a terrible, horrible man, and I'm done. I mean, it's in the newspaper. So sometimes you think it's only going to be those obituaries that you're looking for, or a marriage record, but you can find all sorts of good stories and things. So thank you, Bernice. Newspapers, that's great. Anybody else before we go? We'll think of 20 more things after we get done, but we've probably overwhelmed you. So if you're just starting out, we wish you the best of luck on your journey, and we know you can do it. Educate yourself. Find a genealogy buddy. Work together. Ask questions. Find a club, a society somewhere near you. There are even societies, you may just not have one in your community. You may live in a small little community. There are ones that meet online. Or start one yourself, because I'll bet you anything there are people in your community that would like to be able to build their family trees, and they don't have anybody that won't roll their eyes at them as they try to, you need to start a no eye rolling club and invite people to come and start learning together about tracing your ancestors. So I am really grateful for our panel tonight. Thank you so much, Bernice. Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being here. We sure appreciate it. And thank you for your tips. And we will have some links on the blog post. So remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and remember to head on over to the blog post where you can see links that will lead you to ways for you to help you build your tree and learn how to do it in the correct way and not make the mistakes that so many of us have made. We will see you next time on GenFriends. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.